Philip, thank you very much for joining us today. You're a digital native content editor at RTE. Could you explain a bit what that means and how does your team work?
Well, thank you for having me. RTE is Ireland's national public service broadcaster. We deliver content to television, radio, online, and social media. And I suppose, like many public service broadcasters, over the past few years, RTE has realized that the big challenge for public service broadcasters, chiefly that the way that we used to deliver content in years gone by, which was the conventional way of doing things, that television and radio were the primary places that we would deliver content. Well, the media landscape has changed, and now all public service broadcasters are having to accept and face up to the challenge of delivering content to where the audience is. So we know that the audience, or large part of the audience, may not now watch our programming on television. They may not listen to radio as they would have done in years gone by, but they do want our stories online and on social media. They want the content on their terms. So what my team has a sort of specific remit is to deliver our stories, original stories, in an optimized way, firstly for online and social platforms, but also to then make those stories available, if required, to television and radio or whoever else wants them as well. So we kind of are flipping the conventional way that things have been done in the past, where content always appeared first on radio and television, and then it appeared on social media and online. Well, what my team tries to do, and this is part of trying to fulfill RTE's digital first strategy, is that we deliver our stories first to online and social media, and then if they're wanted by the legacy platforms, they appear on television and radio afterwards. So we are kind of accepting that the audience wants content, wants stories, wants information on their terms. Our challenge is to deliver that content, that material, to wherever the audience is, whenever the audience wants it.
Right. Your team is focused around the concept of mobile journalism, is it? So correct me if I'm wrong, but how long have you been doing that, and what value has it brought for your team and for RT to be able to be more flexible in the way you produce news and stories?
So I first became involved and interested in mobile journalism about 8 or 9 years ago. And that's when I was working in my old job as a TV reporter. I was a TV reporter who always shot and filmed their own stories anyway, but I've used lots of bigger cameras during the course of my career. And as it became apparent to me that the cameras on mobile phones were getting better and better, every time a new phone came out, the camera capabilities improved. So that I was just curious. I was curious to see, could I do what I was doing for television with a mobile phone? And all that happened, my light bulb moment, I suppose, was when there was one story. I decided that instead of using my sort of big video camera, I would use my phone to shoot it instead. And I shot the story on the phone. It went out on television that evening, and nobody noticed. Nobody even cared. I cared, but nobody else did, because it looked fine. It looked okay. Certainly the audience didn't care, because the audience only really cares about what the story is. So that was, I suppose, proof of concept to me that you could do this. And then from that point on, I just started to do it more and more often. I started to I suppose I had a mix and match approach to storytelling. So some stories I would use a bigger camera, some stories I would use my phone, depending on what the story was, depending on how much time I had. And obviously, while I was doing that, I was getting better and better at doing it with the phone. And I was actually enjoying it as well. I started to really enjoy using this much smaller camera to shoot the stories I was doing. And then I suppose what that did, it kind of persuaded other people that this works, that this could be done. And I started to train some of my colleagues. And then as the years went by, I was using my bigger camera less and less, using my phone more and more. And it got to the point that when RTE very definitely pivoted to this digital first strategy, I saw an opportunity to use the way that we were working, the kind of the acceptance of new technology, the interest in sort of different ways of telling stories, the growth of the different platforms. And I just have, I suppose, a bit by accident, a bit by design, managed to use my interest in mobile journalism, use my sort of willingness to use new technology to tell stories, to basically make it work within our overall digital first strategy. So it becomes quite a neat fit. And now I lead a team of a small team, but those guys are all mobile journalists. So the way that we work as a team is quite different to the rest of the newsroom, which still works along fairly conventional lines. Reporters work with camera operators. We have a lot of reporters who edit their own stories, but we also have video editors as well. That's kind of how things have always worked. Then you have my team, which is kind of doing things differently. And I think why this works is it's not about saying that my way is better than the old way, but it's about saying that my way has a place alongside the old way, that my way can exist, because unless we adapt, unless we acknowledge the changes in technology, unless we acknowledge the changes in audience behavior, unless we acknowledge the different ways of telling stories and try different things, then unfortunately, public service broadcasters are going to die because the media landscape is so different to what it was 10, 20 years ago. So for me, mobile journalism started off as something I was merely curious about, but it has now become the foundation of the team that I lead in RTE, because it's actually what my team does best. It's what we're very skilled at. So we've had loads of practice at it. We've delivered hundreds of stories. A colleague of mine has done a documentary. So we have this level of expertise, and it's just, I suppose, it has become a very good way of allowing us as an organization to show that we are experimenting, to show that we are adapting to new technologies, to show that we are trying different things, while still being able to do what we've always done. So, as I said, this is not about saying my way must replace the old way, but it is about saying that a mixed economy where new ways of working can survive and thrive is a good approach.
Right, but your team is still in the newsroom physically, is it? With the rest of the...
Well, we haven't been for the past 2 years.
So look at that.
we were based in the newsroom before the pandemic. But one of the interesting things about the pandemic, I think, has it's shown that a team like mine, which, you know, my team, we obviously have equipment. We have phones, we have iPads, we have microphones, we have tripods, we have a small kit, you know, but there's actually no need for us to go into a newsroom. There is no need for us to go in, day out, and sit at a desk in a newsroom. So one of the interesting things about the pandemic has been that a team like mine, individuals, either the individuals on it or the team itself, actually everybody doesn't have to physically go to the same place every day, because, you know, I can the original principles, I suppose, of mobile journalism is, when we talk about mobile journalism, people obviously think mobile journalism, that's the phone, but mobile also means that you are flexible, that you can be anywhere, go anywhere. I can, you know, I always carry my phone. So in theory, I carry a really good camera with me all the time. And in theory, I carry a really powerful production tool with me all the time. So what this looks like on the other side of the pandemic is, well, we'll have to see. But I think the way my team worked before the pandemic to how it might work after the pandemic will be very different. I don't think we'll always be going in. I mean, we are, while we're not necessarily physically part of the newsroom, we are obviously still part of the newsroom conversation.
Right.
You know, we are still part of the editorial conversation, but we don't necessarily have to be in the newsroom physically, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, it does make sense.
So most of my work. So for the past 2 years, I have not physically been in the RTE newsroom, and none of my team has either. But we've kept going, and we've succeeded in delivering content day in, day out.
Right, and you also use a very particular approach to getting news stories, right? I believe you use tools such as CrowdTangle. And how does that work in your team, and how do you come up with stories using those tools?
Well, what I was very keen, so the team has, like I said, the team has a kind of remit to try to do things differently and to try to, so we use technology differently. The best, I suppose, the most attractive thing about my team to many people is it's low cost. You know, we don't use expensive gear. We don't use we don't use expensive cameras. We don't have expensive edit kits. It's all, you know, it's iPhones and iPads. So the other beauty of my team, I think, is that we could simply, most newsrooms will operate on, they'll have a list of stories at the start of the day. That list of stories is press releases, it's what's in the newspaper, it's what correspondents are doing. It's things that we know are happening because generally someone has told us. A government department has told us that there's a launch, or a press release has come in about jobs being created, or we read in the newspaper that this is a good story and we're going to. So, you know, that's the information comes in a certain way. And that's the way it's come in for years and years and years. What my team tries to do to increase its value, I suppose, is to ignore that list, because we already know that colleagues are doing those stories. There's very little point in us just copying what everyone else is doing, because we're not adding value. And so what we do is we try to find stories in other places. And one of the best ways, I think, to find stories is to look at what's happening on social media. Because whether we like it or not, most people spend an awful lot of time on social media. It's where we learn about the world and where we share our experience of the world. So there are people posting on social media, on platforms and in groups, all day, every day. We use CrowdTangle specifically as a tool to help us navigate all that noise that is happening on social media. CrowdTangle is a tool that is actually now owned by Facebook or by Meta. And what it does, it has, I suppose, two chief aims. First of all, it can be used as a way of monitoring the activity on social media platforms. So you can use it for analytics. You can see how well your stories are doing, or you can see how well your competitors' stories are doing, which is a very useful tool to have that kind of analytical data available to you. It then has another way that you can use CrowdTangle, and that is as a story discovery tool. And that's how we use it primarily. So that what it does is, you know, there are, for example, on Facebook, there are so many hundreds and thousands of different Facebook groups now. You can find Facebook groups about everything and you know, whether it's about mums and babies or Brexit or COVID, or, you know, it could be, you know, there are hundreds of charities, loads of Facebook groups about Ukraine at the moment. So there are all these Facebook groups that have sprung up. They all exist, and they exist organically. And every day people are going into those groups and they're posting stuff. And what CrowdTangle does is it looks at all the activity that's going on in those groups, and it kind of elevates the activity where there's a lot of interest in it. So when it starts to elevate a post, that's when we start to get interested and see, well, why is that post producing levels of engagement within that group? And we often find that people are posting something, they don't know it at the time, but it's a story, or it's the beginnings of a story. And that's how we learn about it. And then we'll obviously follow up, and then it may become a story. So the beauty, I think, of this is that if you accept that my team is primarily concerned, as I said at the start, with delivering better, more optimized, more original content to social media platforms and online platforms, well, we are using a tool to find those stories on social media at the very start. So we use the tool to find the story on social, and then in the best case scenario, we turn it into a story and we deliver it first to social. So we kind of complete the circle, and then hopefully it amplifies outwards to television or whoever else as well. So we're just, again, it's about, when I started in journalism 20, 25 years ago, these tools weren't available to you. Now they are. There are other tools out there. And I think when tools like this exist, when technology like this exists, it makes sense to use them. You know, like I said, the two things which I think are driving all the changes in media and journalism: technology and audience behavior. And I'm not a techie person at all. I'm kind of interested in people. I'm interested primarily, I still think, although my job has changed completely over the past 20 years, when I started out in journalism, my interest was in telling stories. My interest today is still in telling stories. I just have a different way of going about it. And I've embraced the technology that's available to me. I'm interested in using the tools that are available to me. And I think it's kind of incumbent on individuals, it's incumbent on teams, and it's incumbent on newsrooms and on organizations to try to be part of the change rather than resist it.
Right, exactly.
So I've always enjoyed being part of the change.
Yeah, my last question also goes a bit in that direction as well. Because hopefully in 5 to 10 years, there'll still be stories, but what do you think from your point of view, what will change about it? What would change about the way we tell those stories? Not just technologically, but what's your take on that? Perhaps through the metaverse.
This is the kind of the $1 million question, and if we knew the answer to it, we'd be worth $1 million. I think I don't know. I think clearly what we have seen over the past 5-10 years is a fragmentation of the audience. So the audience now finds stories or consumes content in all sorts of different places. There are people using platforms which I have no idea about, and that's where they go every day. So I imagine we'll definitely see more fragmentation. So stories having to be kind of optimized for different places and where the audience is. Technology, obviously, you know, I know there are newsrooms who are much more immersed or exploring the idea of VR or AR. I guess AI, artificial intelligence, will increasingly have a role to play and will increasingly solve some of the problems that newsrooms are facing now, because it will come up with the answers for us. I think what's interesting is over the past 2 years, it's been an extraordinary time to be a journalist. We had COVID, which was, at the time I felt, you know, this is potentially the biggest story that any of us will ever tell. You know, you probably, hopefully, only ever lived through one pandemic. You probably only ever get to tell the stories of a pandemic once in your career. Obviously, the pandemic is still going on, but then in the last couple of months, we've also had another story which I never thought we would tell: a war in Europe, and who knows what direction that is going in. So those two enormous stories have also shown and reminded us that there is still a great reliance on public service broadcasters. There's still a great importance of public service broadcast. We provide something which nobody else does. And in these enormous stories of our times, the audience is still reliant upon us to do that job. However, like I said, the audience is very fickle. The audience won't always stick with us. So our challenge is going to be to try to still continue doing what we've always done, the best fashion that we can do in the face of these enormous, almost impossible to comprehend stories, but still be flexible, still be nimble, still be creative, still look at what technology can do. And I suppose, you know, that's the challenge. And I don't know what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years' time. I just know that, like, I've been at this for 20, 25 years. I hope I'm still at it in 5 or 10 years, because I'm, at this point, I'm as enthusiastic and as interested in what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and the stories that we tell as I've ever been. You know, it's obviously a worrying time in the world at the moment, but I still think it's a great time to be a journalist.
Right. Philip, thank you very much for your time and your insights. It was a pleasure getting to know you and your team, the way you work. So yeah, thank you very much for everything.